One of the other things that I do that I think is pretty cool, because I'm always thinking we have a good group of critical thinkers on our team. So I'm always like, what are they going to say? What's the questions? What's like the little thing they're going to poke at in a good way? And so I'm always trying to think about that. So I actually will often ask ChatGPT to
Mm.
play that role for me, which again, it's like thinking of it more as a collaborator than just something that's going to output a document for me.
So, Justin, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Sure. Justin Gallagher, co-founder of Hoop, former head of product and design for Trello for many years, over a decade. I live in New York.
Excellent. So, Justin, we were chatting earlier today about ChatGPT, and you were sharing some really interesting, amazing use cases. And I feel like, even with myself, and I hear this from so many people, they're like,
Mhm.
it's very magical, but they don't really know, or they feel like they're not using it to its full potential or as
Yeah,
frequently. So, I just made myself some tea, and I thought you
nice.
could ChatGPT.
Love it. I got coffee, but that'll have to suffice.
That's not an brand for you, Justin.
It is now. I'm rebranding.
Oh my god.
A lot of coffee, high caffeine, all times. That's a whole different 20 minutes of content on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think I'm using ChatGPT to the fullest either, or any of this AI stuff, but I'm trying to figure it out and I play with it a lot and I think it's really powerful. The sort of big change or the insight really that I had recently was I kept trying to use it to create stuff, like to do stuff for me. Like I had an idea and I wanted to write it for me, or write this page up or send this email, draft this email. And I was having just like really not great results with that. And the insight for me that changed that was to use it as a collaborative partner and like a sparring partner more than like a final output. So I consider myself to be in charge of the final output. And usually for us, we work mostly async. So it's usually like some kind of written page or something that I'm sharing. So I'm in charge of that. And I usually take wherever I get with ChatGPT, which is, I would say, the middle product, and I paste it somewhere else, usually for us, Notion. And then I massage it and work it from there. But I find I can get to that middle product way faster, and I can get there with more ideas and more effectively, and then from there, it's like the momentum's built, and I can just roll.
I'm just really curious,
Right.
can you share maybe a very specific use case?
One of the things we've been talking about, as all good early stage founders should, is distribution for our product, right? So we built a product, we gotta get in front of people. How are we gonna do that? Lots of challenges. We got limited budget, limited time, et cetera, et cetera. I had this on my list to write something up and share it out with the team because we like to do these sort of async kind of brainstorming exercises before we spend team time on something. I don't know, I just wasn't making progress on it. I find, I don't know, I'd be curious to hear what you think about this. I find I have a blank page problem a lot of times. Like I know what I want to do and like, but I'm like, oh, where do I start? It's such like a big
Mhm.
thing. And I just like stall out before I even start because of that. So what I've found with ChatGPT is I can just tell it a really basic, like one paragraph, here's what I want to do, and it will write something out for me. And immediately I'll be like, this is terrible. But I find it so much easier to critique something and
Mhm.
change it from there than to start
Yeah.
with a blank page. So even if I tell it the first version is terrible, more of this, less of that, whatever, it just gets me going and I can build momentum from there. I find I can do that way faster with a starting point than with a blank page.
Okay, so you're like, I need to write up this page about distribution for
Hmm.
the team.
Yeah.
What's the first prompt in ChatGPT?
Yeah, here, I'm gonna pull it up in the background, let me even look, but it changes, like, I'm always experimenting. This distribution thing's a real thing, let me see if I can find that one. Here it is. Um, so the first thing I did there is I had a spreadsheet. I was thinking a little bit about we have this goal to hit a certain number of customers, in the next 6 months, so I had done some spreadsheet modeling, and I knew the number that we needed to get in terms of, the number being the number of free trials we needed to get started. But I wanted to write up a page on like, how are we actually gonna get that number of trials? So I actually just pasted a screenshot of the spreadsheet, which is pretty cool that you could do that. It's not like a CSV or structured data or anything. It's literally just a screenshot. And I said, here's my spreadsheet. I got 3 hypothetical situations. Right now, we do some paid advertising, but we know that's not gonna scale. I wanna work with the team to brainstorm. Let's have an exercise for additional distribution channels that could work. Low cost, targeted our ICP, and separately, let's talk about some PLG motions that might work. Please help me write the page, make it in my writing style. More to say about that in a second. Keep it clear and concise. And just wrote a page. And it was not very good, honestly. But I could immediately start poking and being like, no, no, don't do that. More of this, and start iterating on it like that.
Okay, so what about your writing style? Did you tell it how does it know?
Yeah. So I found when I started doing this that it didn't sound like me at all. It was very, and sometimes it was very formal, very verbose, that sort of stuff. What I ended up doing is taking a bunch of pages that I had actually written in the past, like final products, and pasting it to him saying, here's an example of my writing style. Please remember this for the future. It
Hmm,
would read it and it would do the memory updated. I don't know if that works as well as some of the tools that are like custom made to do that, but I think it does a better job of writing in my writing style now.
okay, so then you input that spreadsheet, you asked it to write up a page, and then did you export that into Notion?
The first thing I did was I just start like critiquing it and telling it not this, more of this. So it some of it is language related, some of it I'm just scrolling through here and looking. Some of it is like some of the specifics of the details, cost per child, that sort of stuff. Um, some of it, basically, I'm just critiquing it back and forth. The nice thing, it's something similar that I might do with a person, but I don't feel like I have to be as like nice about it. It's just the robot, so it's not like super rude with ChatGPT. Sometimes I say please and thank you still, but I could just be like direct and be like, don't do that, do this instead, and get it to where I want to go.
Yeah. So how many
And
times
so
do you go back and forth before you
I'm looking, there's like at least 10, and every time it's like rewriting the full page.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes I Sometimes it's longer, sometimes it's like a few paragraphs, sometimes I'm adding in new ideas because as I'm reading the page, I'm thinking in my head, like, when someone from the team is reading this, like, what is the narrative that they're getting from this? And sometimes I'm like, "Oh, there's a gap in the narrative here."
Mhm.
It's because I didn't describe that yet. So then I'm like, "In between these sections, we should talk about," and in our case, it was like pricing for paid acquisition and understanding how that's not scalable for a variety of reasons, and add that in so that the narrative to the page makes sense.
Mhm. So how long from start to finish did this take you, the process with ChatGPT, and how long do you think it would have taken without it?
Yeah, that's a great question. The interesting thing about this is I also do it over it's asynchronous, right? So it's not I don't necessarily sit down, I'm like going back and forth for an hour with ChatGPT.
Okay.
Sometimes I will have a flurry of back and forths, and then I might leave it, let it sit for a little bit, and I go to a meeting or I go do something else. And sometimes later I'll have an idea like, oh yeah, because it's in the back of my head now. So later I'm like, oh yeah, we should whatever. I should add in this idea or something like that. And I'll come back and I'll edit it. So I feel like it's like this iteration over time. I let it marinate and I can pepper it with little thoughts and ideas and work that in. So I would say, I don't know, maybe it was like 2 hours total of back and forth, but it was spread across a couple days. I worked on it for half an hour here, half an hour there, kind of thing.
And so how
Uh,
close was it to being the final product when you exported it into Notion to share?
maybe it's 50% or something like that. One of the other things that I do that I think is pretty cool, because I'm always thinking we have a good group of critical thinkers on our team. So I'm always like, what are they gonna say? What's the questions? What's, like, the little thing they're gonna poke at in a good way and so I'm always trying to think about that. So I actually will often ask ChatGPT to
Mm.
play that role for me, which again, it's like thinking of it more as a collaborator than just something that's gonna output a document for me. So what I'll say is, if you were a skeptical engineer who was looking for reasons why that what would your top 3 questions be?
Mm.
And then my sort of favorite thing to add to that is I'll say, ask the questions one at a time and wait for my response to each question. At
Mhm.
the end, revamp the document, incorporating my responses into the document. And so that's I found really good because sometimes it'll ask me questions that I'm like, "Oh, that is a great point. I didn't address that," or "That's something that somebody's gonna ask about." So it
Mhm.
helps me spar on it before I show it to people and anticipate some things that people might say
Mhm.
and round out the document there. And I'll do other things. If you were a senior product manager and
Mhm.
you were reading this as a strategy page, what feedback would you have for the writer of this page? Or
And
yeah, I don't know, play a different game.
that's all in the
It's
same,
all
like,
just in the same
thread.
thread. Yep,
Okay, got it.
yep. So eventually I'll get to the point through that, it's different kind of prompts and sending in ideas and stuff. Eventually I get to the point where I'm like, okay, it's pretty good. It's
Mhm.
not like great, but it's like the shell of it is there. I don't find that I like to do like real editing with it. I find that very cumbersome.
Mm.
So that's when I'll be like, okay, it's there. I'm gonna copy it, paste it into Notion, fix the formatting a little, and then I go in and I read it and I just start editing it.
Mhm.
And I find that at that point it's like pretty far along to where the editing process feels very natural, and also just through the interaction with ChatGPT, I've then thought about it quite a bit at that point, so I know what I wanna say and where I wanna go with it. So it feels pretty quick from there. Maybe it's another hour or something, half an hour or whatever. It depends on the document. If it's sometimes there's quicker things that I'm comfortable sharing, sometimes there's things I feel like I really gotta think in depth about. But I find that goes pretty quickly once I get to that point.
Okay, so that's one example where it's like a writing or collaboration
Yeah.
partner. I feel like you're constantly saying, well, I asked ChatGPT or I came up. What are some other like creative examples or unexpected ways that you've used ChatGPT?
They're all, like, in this vein, idea generation. Let me look back through, a lot of times, like, we on the team, we share a lot of content that we find on LinkedIn and Twitter and those kind of places about how other founders or other companies are approaching certain things.
Mhm.
Lots of times, I will take one of those and go to ChatGPT with it and say, "Hey, this other company is doing this thing. It's really cool because" well, I'm trying to think of a real example so I can be more specific. We were talking about how companies were sourcing their, like, initial customers and how they were, like, targeting outreach. So I said, I think what was it? OpenPhone was the video?
Yeah, yeah. OpenPhone had this nice, I think it was like a 15-minute YouTube video where they talked about how they sourced their first 1,000 customers. It
Yep,
was very
yep,
technical.
yep. I pasted that link into ChatGPT, and I was like, "This is what OpenPhone's doing. Here's what I think is interesting about that." They had these initial relationships that they were trying to really lean into and create closer connections with their early customers. We were doing that when we did concierge onboardings, but now we're past that, we're on to self-serve. How might we think about creating these relationships with Hoop customers in the self-serve world? And it'll spit out a bunch of ideas. And again, it's like back and forth. I don't like this. Don't think that class of ideas, not this class of ideas, but like this one's interesting. What are more like that? And it's just like going back and forth. And I find, especially, I work from home. I'm in my office. There's nobody else here.
Yeah.
It's nice to just like bounce ideas around with someone. And it just helps me evolve my thinking in a way that I personally find harder to do if I'm just like sitting there staring at a screen.
What's like the switch in your brain where you're like, "Ooh, I should ask ChatGPT," versus
Yeah.
picking a human or just thinking about something?
It continuously is changing. So I feel like early on, it was like, "There's a bunch of information. I would like to summarize it. Oh,
Yeah.
ChatGPT can do that. Let me go there." That was like the first thing, and sometimes that was useful. From there, it moved into this sort of like collaborative concept that I've been talking about.
Mhm.
More recently, I've honestly just been using it as notes, almost like notes. Like, I had an idea this morning. I was thinking about, like, a future, like, direction we could take Hoop in,
Mhm.
and I was like, I like to just start it as and I always frame it up, here, I can even share what I was actually writing. Like, I use this notes app called Reflect, and they have this daily notes concept. So every time you go in there, there's, like, a note for the day, and that's how you write it, and then it's cross-linked and whatever. I was thinking at Hoop, like, we capture tasks every day. So I was like, if Hoop had a concept like Reflect's daily note, what would that look like? And I'll say, and I listed out a few things. It could do X, it could do Y, it could do Z. Like, what else could that do? And again, I think of it as, I don't know, I had this sort of like idea. I don't know if it's going to go anywhere, but it was just something
Mm.
to explore.
Mhm.
So actually, that one I voice recorded into ChatGPT too.
I was gonna
I
say it
just like,
seems like a lot to type.
yeah, I just blurb it in there. Um, and then sometimes that just gets the gears going, and maybe later I'll be like, "Oh, we could do that." And I just put stuff in there periodically. I always tell it to output it as a page that I wanna share with the team. Make
Which
it and I always say, "Make it clear, concise, and convincing." And so as I'm going, it's always, like, rewriting that page.
Mhm.
And then from there, I'm thinking, like, "Is this something that's, like, worth sharing with the team?" This is just, like, an idea that I'm figuring out. I don't know if I wanna share it with the team, but I like to have it in that format.
Mhm.
'Cause then that forces me to always think, "Is this interesting for the team? Is this
Mm.
helpful? Would it be thought-provoking? Is it just distracting if it's not something we're gonna be thinking about soon?" But that's always, like, my frame of mind is, like, as I'm fleshing this out, do I wanna share it with the team? And kinda what's the point of that if I do?
How often do you end up sharing stuff publicly versus just keeping it as a thought sort of exercise?
Publicly, you mean, like, with the rest of the team?
Yes, yeah, publicly within our team.
Only started doing this maybe the last few weeks. I would say maybe a third of the things that I pop in there actually end up getting shared with the team.
Mhm.
More often than not, those things are things that I intended to share with the team from the beginning. It was like, I know I have to write this thing up and share it with the team, so let me work on it
Mm,
and share it. A lot of the random ideas I don't end up sharing with the team, but that's because as I work through that idea,
mm,
I either decide it's too far in the future, it's just, like, distracting, I don't wanna, like what's interesting just for myself to work through that idea, but I don't want to distract everybody with it or take people down a total rabbit hole if it's not something we're working on anytime soon. Or I convince myself, actually, that's a dumb idea. And the more that I thought about that, I wouldn't even want to do that. So I'm not going to bother sharing that with the team. But I like it just for myself, for working through my thoughts and kind of understanding them better.
Yeah.
And I find sometimes that line of thinking works its way back into some other doc just as like a side point or just a point of view on something. So it's helpful for me, but not always something that I share the whole thing with the team.
Couple last questions. How much of do you think that it's helping you in terms of being like a product thinker versus just general business owner? Or I guess how much of it is like product specific?
I don't think it's really product specific at all, to be honest. I tend to use it in a lot of product specific ways just because I'm
Yeah.
thinking about roadmap and functionality and all that kind of stuff. But I
And
think this is
it's all
things
that
that apply.
it has all that context from all of your previous. So your chat
Yeah,
GPT must be a product thinker.
totally. Actually, so this was another interesting thing along similar lines. At one point recently, I just opened up a new ChatGPT window, and I said, "What do you know about me?" And it spits out like 20 bullets, and I was like, "Yikes! It knows a lot about me." And then I was like, "What do you know about Hoop?" And I'm like, "Whoa, it knows a lot about Hoop too," which is awesome and scary. The awesome part, especially when I'm talking about Hoop stuff, is like it has a lot of the background of what I've been talking about and what I care about and what we're thinking about,
Hmm.
and so the answers are a lot more applicable and nuanced than they would be if it was just coming in cold with, like,
Yeah.
generic advice. So I find that really helpful. There's obviously a privacy thing that, like, we all gotta get our heads around and be sure that all that information is safe, but the benefits of it having that additional context and being able to provide answers that take that into account are huge. Like, the quality of the work and the collaboration that I have with it is much higher as a result.
Do you pay for chat GPT?
I do, yeah, I paid for it for a long time. I don't remember, a long time. What has it been, like, a year and a half that it's been out or something in the paid form? But
Oh,
pretty much since the beginning, I've been paying, and
yeah.
I get a lot of use out of it. I like it a lot.
All right, just to finish up, what are some like maybe we can both share some like random use cases where ChatGPT has been useful? I'll start. I had my shower head was gross and
Yeah,
I was like, I have no idea how to clean this. And I think traditionally I would have Googled it, but I was like,
yeah,
ooh, I wonder if ChatGPT can do it. So what I did was I took a picture of my shower head. It has this weird green like mold on it. And I was like, how do I clean this shower head? And it gave like this whole recipe for white vinegar and baking soda and a
yeah.
plastic. It was like very detailed. It was incredible.
Visual side of it, where you can take a picture of something or a screenshot of something and pass that in as information is incredible.
Yeah.
Like, that just a picture's worth 1,000 words, obviously, as the old saying goes, but the fact that the computer can actually understand that picture, and it's like the same thing where I pasted in the screenshot of the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
It would've been so
Incredible.
hard to explain all that in text, but to just be
Hmm.
like, "Here's the spreadsheet," and it can interpret that and even do calculations off it was incredible.
What else you got?
I got a few from recently. This was random. I, we have my credit card that I mostly use is a Chase credit card, so I have Chase points on there.
Okay.
And I was trying to figure out if something was a good use of Chase points, or if there was a better use of Chase points. So I asked it, and it was like, "Yeah, it's fine. You can do it. If you wanna if you have any travel plans, that's more effective.
Mm.
But if you're not planning travel, this would be a good use." I was like, "Oh, that's helpful."
Did you have
Fuck
to
the
tell
point.
it all the calculations ahead of time, like how much a
No,
point was worth? It just knew.
no.
Okay.
I just
Awesome.
told it the kind of credit card it is, and it just figured it out,
Okay.
which is pretty cool. I find when I Google that, sometimes it's very, kinda spammy or very long form. I can't get a very clear, concise answer. It's a lot of "it depends." This was much more clear. That was cool. I've used it for help with homework with my kids, which is cool. I took a picture of a math problem and was like, "This is what they're working on. Make up 5 other problems that are like these."
Oh,
Did that
cool.
pretty good. I did it for a Spanish test too. It was the same thing. It was like, "Here's the unit. Here's the vocab words. Ask 10 questions. Wait for the response. Give us a grade at the end." That was pretty cool. The kids get into that too. Feels like high tech and fun.
Yeah.
What else did I use it for recently? And those are the main things.
I have
Just
a
kind
good
of
one
random stuff in there.
while you're looking. So Um, I'm a big Rick Steves nerd. Do you know who Rick Steves
Okay,
is?
no, I don't.
Okay, he's this older travel guide. And he writes all these guides for Europe. He has a PBS show. He's like the most likable older American travel person. Anyways, he always has these self-guided tours in his travel guides and they're always quirky and but they're really useful if you're exploring a European town. So yesterday I took my nephew to visit a campus of my alma mater But I didn't know, like, a good tour. I was like, "I could Google this," but then I asked ChatGPT to make a self-guided tour of this campus in the style of Rick Steves,
Oh, wow, that's cool.
and it did, and it was so good. It was like it had
Yeah,
quirky little jokes, and it did it obviously in, like, 20 seconds, and
yeah,
it was
brilliant.
awesome. Yeah.
That's crazy. We used it for planning our not quite the same thing, but similar. We used it for planning our summer vacation this year. We went to Montana and
Oh,
Wyoming
cool.
and had never been there before, so knew some of the things we wanted to do, but not totally how to plan it all out, and from activities to restaurant recommendations and everything. It was pretty good. It's not again, it's similar. It was like a collaborative partner. We
Mm,
didn't go with like it's not like we're like, "Give us an agenda," and we're like, "Great, we're gonna do this agenda," but it gave us a bunch of ideas, and we massaged it and all that kinda stuff.
cool.
It was
Alright.
one thing I'll do to encapsulate all this, I did this with the vacation agenda, but I also do this with all the collaborative work I was talking about with sharing the team. I always take the final product, in other words, my edited version, and I go back to that thread in ChatGPT, and I say, "Here's where I ended up. Summarize the differences between where we left off and this version," and then it will tell me, like, what were the different like, not like the line by line, but the categories of the differences, and then I always say, "Remember this for future,
Oh,
uh,
that's so good.
times we work together." I don't know if that works or not, but I feel like it helps it understand more of what I'm looking for and, like, how I would present something. We'll see, it's an ongoing experiment to see if it gets better and better at thinking and writing like me.
It had all that other context, so why wouldn't it take
Yeah, I would hope so.
Awesome. Okay, thanks, Justin.
Yeah, of course.